Hello, thank you for opening this recording. My name is Phil Doran, and I want to take you through some of the main points to consider when determining which Incoterms rule might apply to your sales model. This presentation is broken down into 4 short sessions, of which this is the second part, and the recordings are best enjoyed and understood if watched sequentially. Our next step is to consider what happens if the moment of delivery is intended to take place somewhere in the country of supply, but at an address which is not the seller's premises or a place where the seller has control. Handover, therefore, is not at the seller's works, but looking at the diagram, we can see that of the remaining places of handover in the seller's country, the export point or moment of export, that is to say the port or the airport or the land border, these restricted areas are also other places in the country of supply. And now we'll need to take account of a series of commercial terms that are quite old and which were in use when sea freight was the only option open to traders. So they predate air freight or rail freight. In truth, they predate the development of the ICC's product Incoterms. They even predate the existence of the ICC. These commercial terms, although included in the back section of the modern Incoterms rules, were invented and developed by people, sellers and buyers, over many years, perhaps many generations, and they arose from customary practices developed during a period when the seaport or the harbour would be an unrestricted area. It would be a place that the seller could freely enter. This is another crucial point. In sea freight, when considering your model, you must first determine if the seller is allowed free access to the port. If the answer is negative, that is, if it's a modern port under the control of a harbour or port authority, a place where access would be restricted, then if asked the question as to whether delivery or handover is inside the port area, you need to be honest and answer no. What this provides us is a narrower range of possibilities for handover. We know the point of delivery is not the seller's works, and we now know that the point of delivery is not in an unrestricted port area. Delivery, therefore, takes place somewhere in the country of supply after the seller's premises, but before the restricted area of export. That is to say, before the cargo enters the port, the airport or the land border area. Again, in modern trade, these places are places where, generally speaking, the seller will have no access. So far then, is handover at the seller's works? No. Is handover then in an unrestricted seaport area? Well, given the choice of yes or no, we again select no. And once more, we have an FCA, a free carrier model. The seller will hand over the contract goods to a carrier of the buyer's choosing at a named place in the country of supply, and we know that this place is not the seller's premises because of the address included when the term is written and referenced. Handover is to the buyer's carrier on the seller's vehicle or a vehicle arranged by the seller, and although I am using the image of a road vehicle, this transport could be any transport device, a railway wagon, for example. The supply is pre-cleared through all formalities and customs for export, at the risk and the cost of the seller. For a thorough understanding of the use and restrictions with the commercial term FCA when used in this multimodal handover manner, please refer to Module 3 of the series. To continue, we must consider what applies if the model really does involve an unrestricted port area. Although such terms are very old and scarce, there are some ports which still operate in this unrestricted operation, and there are some commodities and cargo types that require the seller to access the vessel, notwithstanding that the shipment is moving through a modern port. If this is the case, then the answer to the question, is delivery in the port area, becomes yes. But I caution you here to be very sure. May the seller freely access the port? Most ports, except under very specific conditions, will not allow outsiders free access. I say there are exceptions, and there are certain ports where no restrictions are in place, but these are in the minority these days. Remember and be cautious. If the port is a restricted area, then you need to move the moment of delivery or handover to the buyer's carrier backwards up the supply chain into the FCA environment we have just discussed. However, if you are sure that the seller may enter the port, then there are two possible points of handover within the port area. Both of these points presuppose that the vessel, the ship, has already docked and that the cargo comes to the vessel, where the vessel generally provides the loading or lifting gear as well. These are not absolute indicators, but these 3 points are a good general guide. The two moments of delivery are either here, alongside the docked vessel, or here, this second point, which is on board the vessel, but with the seller actively engaged in the loading or supervising the loading of the ship to get the goods on board. The choice between these 2 points requires therefore answering a further question, and that is delivery on the vessel as opposed to alongside the vessel? If we say yes, then the model looks like this. If we say no, it looks like this. So then, let's look how the flow diagram deals with these two variants. Does the seller's price include the freight? No. Is handover at the seller's works? Also no. Then is handover in the port area? And here we've said yes, it is. Our current question then is this moment of handover on the vessel? If you answer no, then you're indicating a typical FAS contract. This is free alongside ship, and the address in this case becomes the wharf area within the port where the named vessel has docked. And if you answer yes, handover is on the vessel, then you're referencing a typical FOB contract, FOB being free on board. So we're saying the seller delivers the contract goods, export customs cleared, free of any further risk or cost, on board a vessel at a named port, where the term is best written nominating the specific vessel and port. But remember the detail. Placing the goods alongside the vessel under FAS is placing the goods on the port floor, the actual dockside. Although it must have arrived at some point on a form of transport, road or rail typically, the cargo must be discharged at the seller's risk and cost from that transport and placed on the port proper. But free of risk and cost alongside a ship may also be achieved with a correctly worded FCA contract, only this time the contract goods are still loaded on the delivering device. There could be a considerable cost consideration differentiating FAS and FCA in this example. This is to say, the cost of the lift off onto the harbour could be substantial, so be careful. Most of all, however, be sure that the port is unrestricted, or, if restricted, that you are dealing with one of the exceptions when sellers might be allowed freely to enter the port area because of the circumstances or the nature of the commodity being traded, perhaps. As a broad example, it is unlikely that FAS, FOB, or FCA in the manner of this diagram could be utilized in sea freight container services. It is a common feature of container ports that the port is a restricted area. Cargo is positioned before the vessel arrives, and the lifting equipment is built onto the harbour and not, as in our diagram, provided by the vessel. For this reason, the very old commercial terms like FAS and FOB at the back of the Incoterms text all come with a caution against their use in the container trades. A final point here. But note that to place the goods alongside a vessel in an FAS, free alongside ship manner, may also involve the sea side of the ship and not just the port or land side. Again, the type of operation and port area that would accommodate such a specific model is limited, and using the term in this manner supports a narrow application in most modern trade, but most is not all, and the use of FAS alongside the ship on the water still has a dynamic and important function in international transport. This can be a complex topic, and for a better understanding of the detail of the application of these terms in the correct or most appropriate manner, please refer to Module 4. For now, and as stated, in most modern conditions where the port is a restricted area, where cargo is pre-planned before vessels arrive, and where the lifting gear is on the port side, the point of handover moves up the supply chain to a place which precedes the restricted port. And now the nature of the transport, the method or mode, be it sea, air, road or rail, well, this has no impact on the term used, and the parties are dealing with the multimodal and versatile FCA contract term, free carrier, which, as mentioned, is covered in its multimodal use in a lot more detail in Module 3. Now we have already addressed one half of the available Incoterms rules, those that are prefixed with the letter E or F. So it all begins with the first question: does the seller's price include the freight? So far we've said no, the freight is not part of the seller's price. But what if it is? What happens if our answer becomes yes? Well, we'll take a further break here and look at these freight prepaid models in more detail in Part 3. This was Part 2 of Which Incoterm Rule to Use. Thank you for listening so far.